This is Gemara Baba Kama Daf Samoch Tes. And as we wrap up the month of Teves, all the learning has been generously sponsored as an incredible schos aliyas deshama of Aryeh ben Ya'akov b'siyata deshmaya. The learning of the entire Chabura should bring Aryeh ben Ya'akov, a lit yid that was zeicha to learn by Rav Naftali Trabin Radin, to higher and higher place in Gan Eden Shel Maila. So we're in the middle of discussing Machlokes Rav Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Rav Yochanan says, what is the story? If the ganif is teveach haymoicher, the animal, la'achar yush, you're chayiv. Rish Lakish says, no, you're potter. And the Gemara explained that Rav Yochanan says you're chayiv. Why? Because the chiyuv for playing daled vehei for tvicho mechira, hopefully by now we already understand that there's a special payment the ganav has to pay if he slaughters or sells the animal. Says Rav Yochanan is whether it was done pre or post Yush. Whereas Rish Lakish says no, the chiyuv is only before Yush. Why? Because after Yush it becomes the animal of the ganav, and therefore there's no din of Tvicha u mechira. So says the Gemara, asking another kasha on Rav Lakish, Vari chazra keren lebailim. Asks the Gemara, the Mishnah discusses a case where she's going in the previous case of where the ganav is a makdish the animal. So asks the Gemara that if the Mishnah is talking about a case where the bailim were makdish the animal, why is there kefil at all? The kefil should go back to the owner. Says the Gemara, Kshamar Bedin. The reason is because there was already a Almad Bedin, there was already a court case. Says the Gemara, this will really key us in on the Gemara that we ended off with in the previous year. If we're talking about a case where the dayan, where the bezdin paskind, you have to go and pay. So Ma'ir Hektish, Avilo Hektish Nami. What's the difference if he was makdish the animal or not? Even if he was not makdish the animal, Nami loy lechayvoy. We should not make him the ganav chayiv to pay dalad vehei. Why? Damar Rava said tenloy. Because Rava says that if Bezdin told the ganav, you are obligated to pay, and then Tavach umachar, after the ganav is obligated, he has to pay. Bezdin found him guilty, and then he goes and he slaughters or sells the animal. What is the halacha? Potter. There's no payment of dalad vei. Why? Says the Gemara at the very bottom of Samachas Beis my taima. Kivan to paskua lemilsei v'tavach umachar. Since they already paskin, and only afterwards did he slaughter or sell the animal havali gazlon. That means the act that he is doing is at a time of gizela, meaning not like a ganof, the gazlan in a mishan dashlumi dalad v'hei. Gazlon being he that steals in broad daylight, he who steals perhaps at gunpoint has no payment of dalad v'hei. So says the Gemara that if what happened over here was, it was the achar hamad b'din, after the bezdin already paskin, it should be similar to a case of a gazlan, and therefore there's no dalad v'hei at all. So we turn over to Samach Tesam and Halif, and the Gemara continues to try to understand the parameters of what exactly is going on over here according to Rish Lakish. Says the Gemara, chayiv ata litein loy. But if the Bezin didn't say 10 loy, but they just said, you're chayiv to pay him, tavach umachar, and then he went and slaughtered or sold it, Allah is mishan tashlumei, dalad vehei, my taima, kivin de lo paskel and milsei, since they did not paskin entirely, meaning there's different stages of the psak. They did say that he's chayiv, and the truth is, if you look at the top Taisus points out, it's chayiv litein loy. Loy have a gemar din until Bezdin says you have to go and pay. There's two shlavim, there's two occurrences within the psak. So therefore, back to the Gemara, Kivin lo baskil milsa akati ganafu, and therefore there would be payments of dalad vehei. So the question is, if Reish Lakish is discussing a case where the Dayan said tenlai, why would the Mishnah say that if the owner was makdish it, there was no dalad vehei? Says the Gemara, no. Reish Lakish is going to learn that the case over here is referring to where they said chayiv, but didn't actually say tenlos. There was not a final paskua, a final amada, a final psak halacha, and that really wrapped up the sugya from yesterday, figuring out what was the case in the brisa of the hektish. Continues where the bailam are makdish it. Continues the Gemara 4 lines down, Zamachtasam and Aleph, quoting a previous memra that we just said. Gufa. What did we just learn? If there's an act of gizela and there's no yiyosh, this is the crux of the brisa that brought us into the whole discussion. That if someone steals something, there's no despair. Neither he, the ganef, nor the bailim are able to be makdish, give this item to the Beis HaMikdash. Explains why. The ganef, it's not his, because it belongs to the owner. He stole it. Whereas the original owner cannot be makdish, cannot consecrate it, cannot give it to the Beis HaMikdash. Why? Because it's no longer in his rishos. Asks the Gemara, does Rabbi Yechon really say this? Rabbi Yechon Mishnah. Utana. Now we learned in a Mishnah in Meiser Sheni, Kerem Revai, the case of a vine, a kerem, grapevines in the 4th year. They would mark it b'kzuzis adama, with a clump of earth, to know that these vines are 4th year vines. Says the Gemara, 1 second, just pausing for a moment. Simana ki adama. The reason why they make a siman, a sign, they mark it with a vine, is because it's similar to the adama. Ma adama ikanamine avhainami ki mefarko. When you redeem it, then shari lasanui mine, you'll be able to get benefit from it. So says the Gemara, the reason I'm marking off these vines is to show that you will, yes, get benefit from these vines eventually. Back to the Mishnah, Arla, B'shar Arla, B'charsis. If we have an orchard of Arla, B'charsis, they would mark it with a charsis, some sort of clay tile. And now the Gemara explains why. Simanik charsis, because ma charsis she'ina na mine, just like a charsis, this clod of this tile, one does not get benefit from it. Avhaid lesle hana mine, so to the orchard, you can't get any benefit from it, because it's still within the years of Arla that you're not allowed to benefit from. Continues the Mishnah, Vishel Kvarois. We have an area of a kever, of a burial plot, but the sid, they would mark it with sid. Explains the Gemara. Simana de chivar ke'at samais. The reason is they want to make a simon with something that looks like lime, white, sid, like the bones of the dead body. Back into the Mishnah. Umamacha v'shayfich. And he dissolves the lime in water and he pours it around the kever. Why? So it should be very white. So different ways it teaches the Mishnah Meiser Sheni how they would identify the Kerem Revai, how they would identify Arla, Atzamais, and finally a kever. Continues the Gemara, Amar Ashbag, says Rav Shimon Gamli Abba Medvarim Amurim. When is this din? When's this din that the vines or the grapes of the 4th year and the arla are being marked with a clod of earth and a tile of pottery, respectively, is when? Bishvius. It's during the year of Shemitah. Why? The hefker ninu. Because they're hefker. And since they're hefker, we have to mark them so that any person who's going to take them is going to know their status. Aval b'shar shnei shavua, but the rest of the 7 year cycle halitul rasha v'amos. Says the Gemara, there's no reason to mark it off Rai, because literally stuff the wicked and let him die. Meaning, no one's allowed to take this stuff. It's my stuff. So I should mark it. So if you walk by and you decide to steal my apple, you should know the status of our law. Why would I have to do it? But continues the Mishnah of Hatznuim. The Tznuim will put down coins and they would say, Kol hanilkat mizeh michulal alamayis alalu. They would say whatever is picked from this vine should be mechulal, deconsecrated on these coins, meaning so that one could benefit from those fruits. So what do we see from the end of this Mishnah for the din of the Tznuim? That even though anyone who's taking it is a form of gazlon, is a form of stealing. And yet, we see that the original Bailim have ownership, as they're the ones that are creating this chilul. So this is the Stam Mishnah that's a kasha on Rav Yochanan. Because Rav Yochanan said, without Bailim, without Yiyosh, Einon Yecholim Nahakdish. Now the Gemara wants to know, wait, why Einon Yecholim Nahakdish? We just saw that even though there's no Yiyosh, the original owners retain some level of, they retain some level of ownership. But for the fact that they're putting down coins, that's the kasha, says the Gemara. We see the original owner cannot be makdish it. I said it right the first time. Why does Rav Yochanan say that the original owner can't be makdish it if we see the original owner retains his ownership in this case? Answers the Gemara. Maybe going to tell you me matana tznuin rashbag. Maybe you'll tell me this Tana is a Shimon Gamliel and not a Stam Mishnah. But says the Gemara, the last narrow line, V'amrav Rachanan Rav Yochanan. Chutz from three famous cases, Me'arev Etzidain V'Rayach Reina. So regardless whether it's a Stam Mishnah or whether this is the opinion of Rashbag, either way, Rav Yochanan should paskin like it. So we see over here that the original Bailim do have ownership. So why does Rav Yochanan say that Shneim Einon Yecholim? Lakti Shoy. Says the Gemara in the second white line, Amri loite makol anilkot mizeh. Don't say that the Tznuim would say whoever picks from this, it's machol on these coins. Ela kol hamislaket mizeh. Whatever was already picked, which that's when the owner would be able to do it. But for the future, it would actually not work, like Rav Yochanan just said, because Einon Shaloi v'Einon B'Rishusai. Rav Yochanan asked the Gemara, Rav Yochanan Tzenuin, Rav Daisa Amru Davar Echad. But Rav Yochanan said Tzenuim, and Rav Daisa said one thing. Rav Daisa Nilkat Kamar. Rav Daisa said Nilkat. So we're answering that it's called a mislakit, going on the past. But Rav Yochanan says like Rav Daisa who says Nilkat. Teitanya V'Yudai Mershachus Balabayis Oimin Vaymer Kol Sheilka to Aniyim. Whatever the Aniyim will pick, Ayoim. Yehafker Rav Daisa, no. L'itaisei erev Vaymer. In the evening they would say Kol Sheilka to Aniyim. Whatever was picked, Yehafker. So what do we see? We see Rav Daisa is going in the past, and that's seemingly how Rav Yochanan concurs. Ebuch says we're switching around to Rav Yehuda Rav Daisa. Rav Daisa Rav Yehuda. I'm going to ask the Gemara, Mayiv Chamastis and Ibchal Rav Yochanan. Why don't we just switch out what Rav Yochanan holds? Ve'emat Tznuin Rav Yehuda Amru Davar Echad. Not that it was Tznuim and Rav Daisa like we thought Rav Yochanan said. Two lines to the bottom says Amri Lo Sagya Tamis Ahevech Masnita. It's not. It's never good to switch around the Masnita, the Brisa, the Bahal Masnita Katani. This is Rav Yehuda Breira. Why? Because this is the Mishnah. Famous Mishnah, which Rav Yehuda holds a Breira. Shemin the Rav Yehuda Ba'alma to Leslie Breira. And we know that Rav Yehuda doesn't hold a Breira. So therefore this Mishnah, it makes more sense to switch around as will fit with other Mishnahs. Titinan, as we learned in a Mishnah, many places throughout Shas. We had this in Sukkot Eruvin, in Megillah. many places, this is the quintessential Gemara of Breira. So over here, the Gemara is going to prove that it was indeed the right thing to switch around Rev Yehuda. Says the Gemara, as we turn over to Samach Tasav Beis, hopefully this Gemara should sound a little bit familiar. Someone buys one from amongst the Goyim. Omer, he says, now he doesn't have time to be mafresh the appropriate Chumas Umaistis. Rashi always learns because Erev Shabbos. Taisus doesn't say it over here, but Taisus elsewhere points out, or maybe he just didn't have a kli to be mafresh into it. So what does he say? Omer, Shnei Lugin Shani Osid in the future lahafresh to separate Harin Chuma. It should be Truma now. A Sarah should be Meiser Risha and Tas should be Meiser Sheni. Umayich l'Moshes Miyad Divrei Rab Meir. Whereas Rav Yehuda, Rav Yosef, Shemen, Oisrim, they all do not hold of Breira. Says where Amri, you're switching around the Mishnah is the Braisais because we had a steer Rav Yehuda. Why? The Amrit Rav Yechlan. So what do you do with that fact that even Rav Yechlan himself held is supposed to be called a mislaki? Says the Gemara 10 lines down, Samachtas Hamid Beis. First word online is Hamislakate. Alma Isle Breira. For Rav Yechlan, last Le Breira. So we're stuck. We want to switch the Braisais. We have this famous Braisa of Rav Yehuda of Lekech Yayin. The Rav Yehuda is of the list of saying Oisrin. That there's no Breira. If you want to say that not, then how are we going to switch around to Rav Yechlan? We have a Braisa Rav Yechlan says Machzirin Zeb Yovel. So what do we do right now? Ella says the Gemara La'ilam Kol Hanilkat. Rav Yechlan Stamach Rinash Chai. Why did this whole story start? Because Rav Yechlan said Shneihem both the Balabayis and the Ganif are not able to be makdishin. Zelfi Shena Shalai the Ganif, Zelfi Shena Rishusai the Bailim. We had many questions back and forth. Says the Gemara, all those questions are predicated upon the fact of Yechlan Paskins. Excuse me, like a Stam Mishnah. Says the Gemara, I'll prove to you that Yechlan found a different Stam Mishnah. Titanam, we learned in the Mishnah, Ein Aganif, Achar Aganif, Mesham Tashlume Kefel, doesn't pay Kefel. So what is the reason why the second Ganif doesn't pay Kefel? Bishlam the Ganif Rishalom Mishalem. Why? We're going to be based on Ish, let me base on Ganif. So you're never going to pay Kefel to the original Ganif because it says you steal from the hands of the Ish, of the owner, not from the Ganif. El Labaylim Nishlam, why does he not have to pay to the original owner? El Alav Shramina, Zelfi Shena Shalai, Zelfi Shena Bershusai. Must be mamish like Rav Yechlan said that the reason is Zelfi Shena Shalai, Zelfi Shena Bershusai. So what do you see? This is the Stam Mishnah that Rav Yechlan is going to hold like when he said that neither the Bailim nor the Ganev could be makdish the item. Says Gemara, my chazis azal basar histama laviki haistama. How do you know which stama to go with? This knew him. We have two different stam mishnayis. Says the Gemara, 10 lines from the white lines. Misham de Messiah leikra. The reason is because we have a pasuk. The ish ki yaktish es beisei kodesh Hashem ma beisei reshusay avkol bereshusay. And that's the reason why Rav Yechlan is going to get his din. He's going to have to hold like the other stam mishnah. Omar Abaye. Says Abaye, continuing the theme of that which we said, he loved Amar Rav Yechlan Snuin. V'Rav Daisa Mutavar Echad Hava Mina Snuim Islay de Rav Daisa. Rav Daisa Leslay did Snuim. Says Abaye, if not for the fact that Rav Yechlan taught us that the Snuim and Rav Daisa hold of each other, I would have thought that the Snuim hold of Rav Daisa, but Rav Daisa does not hold of the Snuim. What does that mean? Explains the Gemara 7 lines. From the wide lines, first one line is Snuin. Snuin is like Rav Daisa. Uma beganif of the Rabbanan Tekantai Aniyim. If in the case of a ganif, Tekanta, if in the case of a ganif, the Rabbanan made a takana for the ganif. who went and he stole, and yet they create a matzav to make sure he doesn't end up eating the wrong trumos and maasers arla, etc. Aniyim shich lemimar. So would he have to say the same thing for aniyim? That's pashit. Rav Daisa Leslie the snuin. Rav Daisa does not hold of the snuin. Why? Aniyim hu da'avdil hu rabbanan tekanta v'kanav love the rabbanan. There was only a special tekanta for the aniyim, but not for the snuim. Rav Daisa Leslie did snuim. Continues the Gemara on my Rava. With this, we're going to wrap up the shiur. Says Rava, 2 lines from the white line. Tiladam Rav Yechon snuin Rav Daisa amru davar echad hava amina mantana snuin Rameiri. Says Rava says be'etzem. I would have argued on the whole thing. If not for the fact that you told me that Rav Yechon says snuim and Rav Daisa hold the same thing, I would have violently argue. Why? I would have said the snuin is Rameir. Because of the first white line, Lavam Rav Meir, does Rav Meir not hold Meiser Mama and Gavayahu? That Meiser is belonging to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ve'afilu achi, and even still in Pedia, regarding redeeming Meiser, Ogni Rachmana Bereshusei. Dichsev, Vem Gal Yigal Ish, Meiser Chamishiso Yasef Alav. Kai Rachmana Meiserai, O Meisev Chaimish. And you have to add on a Chaimish. Karim Ravai, the fruits of the 4th year of the vine. Nami Gamar Kadik Kajmi Meiser. Ksevach Kadish Ilum Ksevach Gabe Meiser. Chol Meiser Aretz Vizar Aretz V'Vi Aretz Hashem. Hu Kadesh Maha Kadesh Ksев Gabe Meiser Aval Gav. Just like by the Kadesh it says by Meiser. Av Gav Demam Gavayahu Linin Pedio Kmi Rachmana Bereshusei. Af hay kodesh nami dechsev gavi karim ravai. Af gav to lam emayna didehu. Linin achule akanmi rachmana bereshusei. Why? Daki yesa bereshusei nami halav didehu. Even when it comes to his possession, it's not his. V'matzi mechal mishamachi matzi mechal. Aval gavi leket kivdim money didei ki yesa bereshusei. Then who dematzi the mafkir lei ki lesser bereshusei lo matzi mafkir lei, and that's how Rava is going to explain this final memra of Arbaya. Stop over here, and Rav Yechon is going to take this din of the tznuim. When actually, it's just one Rava Ravina. It's really the statement of Ravina really wraps up this thing. It's not just finishes 3 lines to the bottom. Omar Ravina, Yilav them Rav Yechon soon Rav Daisa Amru Davar Echad Hava Amina Mantana Snuin Rav Daisa He. So already had Rava that taught us, and not for that Rav Yechon said Snuin and Rav Yechon, he would have said it's like Rav Meir. So Ravina says he would have said like Rav Daisa. Kechlo take she's tam Mishnah Rav Yechon. So you don't have a kasha tam Mishnah Rav Yechon. Stam Yichidol Kamar. Do not say that he goes with the stam Mishnah. That's how Ravina would have answered it up. We'll pick it up from the top line on Ayin Omar Aleph the next year. Psiyata Dishmaya.